Welcome to tonight's bedtime story. In this quiet descent into the past, you're not a chieftain, not a warrior, not a hero sung in the halls of longhouses. You are a captive. The year is 793 AD. The Viking raids have begun. Your village was not spared. Now you are hundreds of miles from home, dragged across sea and forest into a world of cold gods and colder men. Your name has been forgotten. Your freedom is a concept, not a reality, and your days are spent in silence, servitude, and survival. If you enjoy stories like this, leave a like and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. We'd love to hear from you. Now lie back, close your eyes, and drift into the long grey chill of the north. You wake before the sun, if it rose at all. The northern sky is still a flat grey smear, like old ash soaked with cold seawater. You are cold, always cold, and it is the kind of cold that doesn't sting or snap. It simply settles, like damp wool on your spine, pressing into your lungs. You lie on straw that is damp with salt air and worse. The thatch above you leaks when it rains, which it often does, and the wind pushes through the cracks in the timber walls like a persistent curse. You don't move at first. There's a moment, brief, stupid, when your body wants to pretend it's home again, that your sister is still asleep beside you, that your father will be stoking the fire, but the fire here is long dead, and so is that life. You rise because you have to, not out of choice. That luxury disappeared the night the longships came, when flames lit the horizon and your life snapped in half. You're not allowed to sleep in the longhouse proper. That's for free folk. You sleep beside the goat pen. You smell like the goats. You wash where the goats do, rarely in the same trough. Your clothes are wool, rough and unlined, the same ones you've worn for months. You have a second tunic, but it belongs to someone else. Everything here does. You wear what you're given, you eat what's left, and you speak only when ordered. The others are already up. The other thralls. You don't know all their names, and they don't know yours. You nod occasionally, but rarely speak. The language here is sharp, guttural, hard to pick apart in your ears. It snaps like axes splitting pine. You're learning slowly, not because you want to, but because you have to. When the old woman in the longhouse shouts a word and you don't move fast enough, you get the back of her ladle across your neck. It's not as bad as the whippings. You only got that once, your first week here, when you dropped a clay bowl. The sound it made when it hit the stone floor was nothing compared to the sound the overseer's leather strap made on your back. Your work today is the same as yesterday. Hauling wood, always wood, firewood, shipwood, timber for fences. There is no shortage of trees in this place, just labour, and that's what you are now. Labour. You rise, piss behind the stable, and make your way toward the woodshed. The mud sucks at your feet. You stopped noticing the smell of rot and manure days ago. Your hands are raw, calloused, split open in places where the sap got into the cracks. You don't wear gloves. Gloves are for craftsmen, for people with value. You're replaceable. You know it. Everyone reminds you. Breakfast is thin. A scrap of barley bread, hard as a brick, soaked in a ladle of milk that's begun to sour. It's still warm from the cow, but it turns your stomach all the same. You eat because not eating is worse. No utensils. You scoop, chew, swallow. One of the older slaves glares at you for taking too big a bite. You ignore him. There's no brotherhood here, just quiet resentment, the kind that builds like mould between damp timbers. By mid-morning you're knee-deep in the forest beyond the village. The trees here are thick, ancient and slick with rain. You carry a dull axe with a cracked shaft and swing it like your life depends on it, because it does. The log you're assigned is soaked from last night's rain, heavy as stone, and too large for one person to drag. But you try. You try, because if you don't, someone else will be punished, and they'll blame you. The Norse believe in strength, in will, in stoicism, and if you show weakness, they call it laziness. If your back fails, they call it rebellion. Either way, The punishment is the same. The work goes on until your arms burn, until your shoulders scream, until you feel the dull throb of hunger pressing beneath your ribs like a fist. There's no break. There's no bell. The sun is your clock, and even it hides most days. At noon, if it can be called that, you're brought a small hunk of dried fish and a turnip boiled to mush. It's salty, bitter, and full of bones. You chew slowly, carefully. You've seen another thrall choke once. They left him to die, said it was the gods' will. The gods here are not your gods. You were raised to believe in saints and crosses. Here they worship men with hammers and wolves. They hang charms from trees, smear blood on doorposts and wear amulets shaped like hooks. You watched a man be sacrificed last week, tied to a tree, throat cut like livestock, the snow beneath him turning rust red. They said it was for the harvest. You didn't speak. You didn't run. You just watched. You're learning not to blink. The afternoon brings more wood, more hauling, more silence. Occasionally a free man walks past. A farmer, a smith, a warrior. They barely look at you. When they do, it's with boredom. You're a fixture now, like a bucket or a fence post. Once, one of them threw a scrap of meat to you like you were a dog. You didn't pick it up. Not out of pride. That's gone. But because the last time you ate too fast, you vomited and couldn't finish your shift. By evening, your body is numb. Your shoulders feel like they're packed with gravel. Your hands are blistered. Your feet are cold. You return to the village as the torches are being lit, their oily smoke curling into the sky. You see the chieftain's longhouse, tall and golden in the firelight, the carved dragons at its eaves catching the last of the sun. Inside they will be feasting. Mead, meat, music. You won't see any of it. You're sent to muck out the latrines. You do it without complaint, holding your breath as you dump the filth into the trench at the edge of the fields. You've cleaned worse. Once they made you scrub the blood from the training pit after a duel. You can still smell it in your sleep. The mix of sweat, iron and wet dirt never leaves your nostrils. There is no dinner. You ate already. Or you didn't. It doesn't matter. You're not entitled to more. You walk back to your corner of the barracks, shoulder brushing against the rough timber as you step over a puddle of goat urine. You lie down on your straw, curl your legs to your chest, and pull the wool over your head. It smells like mildew and smoke. You sleep not because you're comfortable, but because exhaustion drags you into unconsciousness like a tide. And tomorrow you will do it again. You wake again to the sound of coughing. Not your own this time. One of the other thralls, a Gaul or maybe a Briton, is curled up in the corner hacking up phlegm into the straw. You don't flinch. It's been going on for days. His skin has gone pale and waxy, the sheen of sweat sticking to his forehead even when it's cold enough for your fingers to go numb overnight. You already know what will happen. He'll be too weak to work. Then they'll either drag him out or leave him in here to die. If he dies, you'll be told to burn the bedding, not because it's sanitary, but because it smells bad and makes the livestock nervous. You sit up slowly, knees clicking, and rub your face with hands that still bear faint traces of pitch from the wood hauling. There's no soap. You scrub your fingertips with a handful of sand and a bit of yesterday's rainwater pooled in a cracked clay bowl. It helps a little, mostly with the illusion of cleanliness. Dirt settles deep in the grooves of your skin now. It is part of you, like your new name, if you can call it that. A grunt of a word they bark when they want you to move something heavy or clean up the ash near the hearth. Today is washing day, not for you, that's not a thing, but for the linens and tunics of the free folk in the longhouse. That means hours at the river, wrists red and raw from the freezing water, scrubbing fabrics you'll never be allowed to wear with soap you're not allowed to touch. It's lye soap, made from rendered animal fat and ash, and it smells like wet charcoal and old bones. It scalds the skin but cuts the grease from their precious wool cloaks. You wring them out and beat them against rocks, repeating the rhythm over and over until your arms feel like ropes pulled too tight. The river runs fast in spring, swollen with meltwater from the mountains. It numbs your feet even through your worn-out leather soles. You drop one of the tunics by accident and watch it swirl downstream before lunging after it. You catch it, barely, but not before your knees hit the riverbed stones. Later, you'll find your legs covered in bruises. It won't matter. No one asks about bruises. Everyone has them. Back at the longhouse, the air smells of roasting meat and wood smoke. It's hard to ignore. Your stomach contracts in protest. It's been 2 days since you had anything other than porridge and old broth. Meat is for warriors and priests. Once they tossed you a strip of gristle from a goat haunch, a discarded tendon they scraped from the spit. You chewed it for what felt like hours. It tasted like leather soaked in brine. You'd eat it again in a heartbeat. Your afternoon task is mucking out the animal pens. Chickens, goats, pigs. Each has its own scent, none of them good. You scoop manure with a split-handled shovel, the wood giving you splinters so fine they vanish under your skin like needles. You itch constantly, not just from the straw mites and lice, but from the wool tunic clinging to your back like wet bark. You scratch at your ribs, knowing it will bleed. You do it anyway. It distracts you from the smell. While you work, you hear laughter from inside the longhouse. They're drinking. Again. Mead, probably. Made from honey you helped collect weeks ago under the threat of bee stings and smoke-filled eyes. You nearly fell from the ladder while reaching for the combs. One of the boys in the village had thrown a pine cone at you as a joke. They laughed when you landed hard, twisted your ankle. The swelling only lasted a few days. You limped the whole time and were given no reprieve from your duties. No one offered a hand. That's not how this place works. You're not supposed to be seen, just used. In the evening, the clouds roll in thick and low. Rain begins to fall. Not a storm, just a steady, miserable drizzle that turns the paths into sucking, sticky bogs and makes your cloak, what little you have, weigh twice as much. You keep moving because if you stop, you'll be scolded. Or worse, noticed. Sometimes you look at the other slaves. Some are young, too young, barely taller than your shoulder, and already their hands are toughened by labour. One of them is missing 2 fingers. Lost them to frostbite last winter. Another girl has burn marks up her forearm from leaning too close to the fire pit while stirring stew. No one treated it. The wound scarred in long, ridged cords like melted wax. You clean the ash pit by hand. It's where they dump bones, burned food, and charcoal after feasts. You sift through it with a flat wooden paddle, trying to make it even, to hide the bones of some animal, or someone unlucky. Occasionally you find scraps worth pocketing, a bit of metal, half a nail, a shard of flint. You hide them, not to escape. That's pointless, just in case. One day it might buy you something, a favour, a scrap of cloth, a moment of leverage when you're sick and can't lift another beam. At night you try to sleep. It's hard. The roof leaks again. Your straw bed is soaked through. The wind howls down from the hills like a pack of wolves. You curl around your chest, arms tucked in, breathing shallow. Your ribs stick out now. You've lost weight. You're not sure how much, but the bones under your skin feel sharper. You wonder if this is how you'll die, not in some dramatic escape or tragic rebellion, but quietly, in the dark, with no name and no sound. Sleep comes in short bursts. You dream of trees, not the ones here, but the ones near your old home. Green, not grey, thick with birdsong and of warm bread and salt. But it's always ripped away, the same way it was in life. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, not because you're strong, not because you're brave, but because there is no choice. Morning breaks late, as it always does here. The sun never seems eager to rise above this land. It just leaks in slowly, pale and cold, through gaps in the clouds. You're already awake when it happens, staring at the inside of the wall, cracked timber slats spotted with mildew and scratch marks. Maybe yours. There's no rooster, no alarm. You wake because your back hurts, because the lice are moving again, because your stomach groans at the memory of food. There's no rest, just lighter shades of misery. Today, you've been assigned to the forge. It's not because you're skilled, it's because the blacksmith's usual boy burned his hand on a hot nail, and someone has to pump the bellows. That someone is you. The forge is warmer than the river at least, though the heat is choking, and the smoke curls down your throat like grit. You keep the coals hot while the blacksmith hammers metal on stone. Sparks jump like fireflies. They land on your tunic. You flinch but say nothing. A burn is preferable to what you'd get for complaining. The tools you help make aren't for you. They're for others, the freemen, the warriors, the shipwrights. Spearheads, nails, hooks, rivets. Once, you helped cast the iron blade of a seax, a short knife meant for close combat. You watched it cool and vanish into the hands of a boy barely old enough to shave. He held it like it made him a god. You looked away before your face could betray what you were thinking. At midday, the smith tosses you a strip of dried herring and a heel of bread hard enough to break teeth. You soak the bread in water and chew slowly, rationing each bite like it's your last. Maybe it is. There was a woman last winter who died of a fever. She went to sleep shaking and never woke up. The other thralls wrapped her in her blanket and burned her by the riverbank. No priest, no prayers, just ash in the wind. You think of her sometimes, not because you knew her, but because it felt like a rehearsal. The rest of the afternoon is spent hauling slag and ash to the midden heap. The waste pile is enormous now. Bones, charcoal, broken pottery, spoiled food, and excrement all tossed together in a slow rot. It stinks worst after the rain, when steam rises and the flies form black clouds over the mess. You work beside a man with only one eye. He never speaks, just shovels. You both know the rhythm. Shovel, walk, dump, over and over until the sun bleeds out behind the trees. In the evening you're summoned to the longhouse, not inside, but behind it. One of the chieftain's warriors needs his boots cleaned. They're caked in dried mud and pig dung from a hunt. He sits nearby, drinking from a horn while you scrape the soles with a flat stone. He doesn't acknowledge you. When you finish, he tosses the boots aside and walks away barefoot into the firelight, laughing. You collect the boots and return them to their place, careful not to speak, not to be noticed. You pass the livestock pens on your way back to the hut. The goats are bleating. The pigs are rooting in the muck. One of them looks sick, its sides heaving, foam at its mouth. You report it to a freeman in broken Norse. He slaps you for interrupting his meal. The pig dies 2 days later. No one thanks you. The carcass is butchered anyway. The meat is dried and fed to the dogs. That night the wind rises again. A storm rolls in off the sea, hurling rain sideways against the thatch roofs. You curl under your blanket, still damp, still itching, and try to pretend you are somewhere else. You imagine your village before the raid. The thatch there didn't leak as much. The bread was warm. The days longer, but kinder. You used to fish with your cousin from the rocky shore. He didn't survive the invasion. You saw them take his head. It rolls through your dreams like a stone in a barrel. You wake before dawn to the sound of the horn, a long, low moan that means someone's ship has come in. Maybe from across the sea, traders, raiders. Doesn't matter. You won't see the ship. You'll see the mess it brings. Barrels to roll, cargo to unload, blood to clean. You rise, you move, you endure. Because that's what you do now. The air smells of salt and rot. Not a new development. Just sharper this morning. When the tide shifts and the wind changes, the whole coastline reminds you of decay. Fish bones, algae, wet timber, and the stink of salt, stiff sails that have dried too many times without ever being cleaned. You're standing on the stone path leading down to the inlet, arms aching from dragging crates of dried cod and reindeer hides down to the water. A trader has arrived from across the sea, bringing amber and iron in exchange for goods and captives. You keep your eyes low. You're not the newest thrall anymore. That status now belongs to a woman with a shaved head and hollow cheeks. She hasn't spoken since she arrived, but you recognise the blank look in her eyes. It's the same one you wore after they dragged you ashore, soaked and coughing. Half your village behind you in chains. She's been assigned to kitchen work. Better than latrines. Worse than nothing. She smells of soot and smoked meat, and when you pass each other, She looks at your face like it's a question she already knows the answer to. The work doesn't end, it just changes shape. One day you're hauling firewood across the rocky slopes, the next you're thatching a roof with bundles of reeds until your fingers split open from cold. In summer, the sun burns your neck raw. In winter, the wind slices through your tunic and flays your skin with every gust. You've developed a limp from an untreated sprain in your left ankle, but you don't walk slower. You can't. A task done slowly is an excuse for someone else to take it from you, and not all tasks are equal. Some are better, some are death sentences. You eat little, mostly barley gruel and the occasional radish. When you're lucky, boiled fish skin, or a bit of sour cheese so hard it snaps in your mouth like bone. You've developed a technique for chewing with your back molars, since your front teeth have begun to rot. Black lines crawling up from the gum. You rinse your mouth with water when you can. You chew on bark sometimes to distract yourself from the hunger. Sleep is no reprieve. Dreams now are cruel. Fragments of old memories warped into nightmares. You see your father's face, twisted not with age, but with firelight from that first raid. You hear your brother calling for you from behind a barn that didn't survive the flames. And then you wake with a start, heart pounding, only to find yourself wrapped in the stench of human sweat and animal dung, lying beside another slave who snores through broken teeth and fevered mutters. Your mind has changed. You've noticed it. You don't feel fear the same way. You don't feel much at all some days. Just a deep, echoing blankness, like you're watching yourself from the outside. You act, you nod, you carry, you obey. But you do it through a fog, as if your real self was buried with your name back in the earth of your village. This hollow version of you survives because that's all that's left to do. One afternoon a boy throws a stone at you. Not hard, not to injure, just because he can. You glance at him, then look away. If you react, he'll do it again. If you ignore it, maybe he'll stop. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they escalate. Once you were beaten for flinching too slowly when a warrior tossed you a skin of ale. Your lip still bears the split scar. You've learned to vanish in plain sight. Not literally, but behaviourally. Eyes down, shoulders rounded, movements quiet, efficient, forgettable. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't sit unless commanded. You don't laugh. You've forgotten how. When you first arrived, you cried at night. Not loudly, just soft, steady tears into the straw. Now you don't. Your body knows it's a waste of water. You find small rebellions in routine, hiding a sharp rock in your bedding, not for escape, but to feel the weight of choice. Whispering your old name to yourself before sleep, even if the syllables feel foreign now. Rearranging firewood in subtle patterns, a childish act of control that no one else notices. They are meaningless acts, and yet they are yours. The Norse talk of their gods, Odin, Thor, Freya. You've heard the tales. Some are sung drunkenly by firelight, others are shouted before battle. You don't have gods anymore, or maybe they don't have you. Either way, you don't bother with prayer. It didn't stop the raid, it doesn't fill your bowl. You've replaced belief with endurance. It's quieter, colder, but it works. And when the sky darkens again, and the wind begins to howl through the trees like some ancient beast, you keep walking. You wrap your ragged cloak tighter. You blink into the snow and keep hauling firewood to the longhouse step by frozen step, because there's nothing else to do, and because no one else will do it for you. The first snow arrived 2 nights ago, not with ceremony but with silence. You woke up buried beneath a half-frozen blanket that had absorbed the snowfall through the leaky thatch above. The other thralls cursed softly in the dark, scraping frost from their clothes, their hair, their bedding. You didn't speak. You just lay there a moment, listening to the wind slide through the cracks in the wooden hut like a blade, and thought, winter again. Everything is harder in the cold. The wood is heavier when wet, the rope stiffer, the water crueler. The buckets you carry to the well split your hands open along old blisters. The skin cracks and bleeds, and you feel it freeze in real time. You wrap the worst of it with animal sinew, or scraps of cloth if you can scavenge any. Once, you tried to use wool from the fire pit kindling pile. You were beaten for theft. Not because they needed the wool, just because they could. You don't cry from pain anymore, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you've simply adapted, like a tree that bends in the wind until it grows crooked. The days now begin before the light returns and end after it's gone again. You move by torchlight or moonlight, or whatever flicker of flame can be spared. Inside the longhouse, the chieftain's family drinks warm goat's milk and eats salted boar around the fire. You can smell it from outside, that thick, greasy scent of meat and garlic and spiced honey. It's the smell of what you will not have. Your meal is black bread and turnip broth. The bread is mouldy more often than not. The broth tastes like warm dishwater strained through a root cellar. You chew slowly, deliberately, savouring even the blandness. Hunger teaches gratitude for absence. No maggots today. That's a victory. Lately they've had you digging trenches, not for war, for drainage. Meltwater from the hills floods the livestock pens if you don't carve channels fast enough. You spend days waist-deep in muck, up to your elbows in freezing sludge, using a bent iron spade that weighs more than it should. You don't wear shoes. They gave you a pair once for hauling cargo up the cliffs. One of the warriors took them back when the leather began to crack. Your feet are numb more often than not. When they thaw, the pain comes in waves, hot and stinging like fire. You flex your toes in secret when no one's looking, terrified that one day they won't move anymore. Frostbite is common among thralls. They don't bother amputating. They just let it rot and blame the gods. The livestock are dying faster than usual. A sickness spreads through the sheep. Their eyes yellow, their mouths foaming. You bury 3 of them in one day and watch your master kick a 4th until it stops twitching. He orders the carcasses burned. You stand back as the smoke rises into the sky, thick and oily, and wonder what happens if the sickness spreads to the humans. Probably nothing. You're not important enough to be quarantined. You've begun to lose count of the months. The sky remains the same shade of iron. The days blur, the chores rotate, but they all lead to the same place. Exhaustion. You carry water, you scrub hides, you salt fish, you chop trees, you sleep in dirt, you wake in pain, you do it again. And yet, something has shifted. Last week you caught a glimpse of yourself in the river. Not the person you were, but this newer thing. Leaner, harder. Your eyes are different. Still tired, but sharpened like chipped flint. There's a quiet to you now that wasn't there before, not peace, just an acceptance. Or maybe something colder than that. A readiness. You don't think of escape. You've seen what happens to those who try. One man ran 2 summers ago. He was found 3 days later with his leg broken and throat torn open by dogs. They hung him from a pine and left him there for a week as a warning. Even the birds didn't touch him. But you do think of endurance. You think of how, despite it all, you're still here. Still moving, still breathing. There's no glory in it. But there's a kind of quiet defiance in refusing to break. Sometimes you speak to the new thralls, not in full sentences, just fragments. Words from your old language, names of herbs, tricks for keeping warm, how to chew pine bark to calm a cough, small things, almost nothing. But they look at you like you've handed them gold. You remember the first time someone offered you help? A woman with white hair braided tight against her scalp. She gave you a lump of charcoal to rub into your boots to waterproof them. She died that winter. Her body was burned with the rest of the sick. You never knew her name. But you still use the charcoal trick. Some things stay. On the coldest nights, you dream of fire. Not warmth. Fire. Flames licking up wooden beams. Smoke curling around your hands. You don't scream. You just watch. Sometimes, in the dream, it's your own hut. Sometimes it's the longhouse. You don't always feel guilty when you wake. Some mornings you feel calm. You're not proud of this, but you don't deny it either. That's what this place is made of you. Not a hero, not a monster, just a survivor with no illusions. You no longer count the seasons by the moons or the grain harvests. You count them by who's still alive. That old man with the crooked back who used to feed the goats, dead before last thaw. The boy who screamed in his sleep. The one who always worked barefoot, even through frost. They found him stiff beside the river one morning, still gripping the pail. No one cried. One less mouth. The new slaves don't last long. You can spot it in their posture. The ones who still carry themselves upright still have too much pride in their shoulders. It's like a flag announcing they haven't adjusted yet. They break faster than the ones who already shuffle with heads bowed. You stopped offering advice. There's no wisdom you can give that the cold and hunger won't beat into them anyway. You wake before the sun now, not from duty but from habit. Before the dogs begin barking, before the cattle groan, before the master's children throw their scraps into the snow, you rise into the dark, stretch the ache from your joints, and step outside into the icy air where the mist lingers low like smoke. Your breath clouds in front of your face. Your fingers sting with numbness. But you are moving. That's what matters. You know the rhythms of this place better than some of the free men. You know which parts of the slope flood in early spring, which trees drop limbs that can be used for firewood, which guards are cruel, and which are merely indifferent. You even know which chickens are more likely to peck your hands if you reach into the coop too quickly. None of it makes your life easier, but it gives it shape. There are days when your body rebels. Your legs lock up. Your back spasms. Your fingers refuse to grip the handle of the shovel. You collapse behind the stables and pretend to fix a rope just to steal 5 minutes of breath. And still, they expect the chores done. The livestock fed. The paths cleared, the meals cooked, the wounds cleaned. You perform the litany of servitude as though it were a prayer, not because you believe, but because you've forgotten what else to do. Some of the Norse speak to you now, not kindly but familiarly. You've been here long enough to become part of the furniture. They no longer see you as a novelty or a threat. Just one more hand to swing the axe, carry the load, scrape the ice from the eaves. You're the slave who doesn't collapse, the one who keeps going. That earns you nothing, but it does keep you breathing. Once the chieftain's wife handed you a strip of dried apple, just held it out while you cleaned blood from a butchered deer's hide. You took it with a nod, and she didn't speak. You chewed it slowly, tasted the sharp sweetness like it was a memory. You savoured that bite for the rest of the week. Not because it meant kindness, but because it meant you still remembered what sweetness was. You've noticed your body changing, hard muscle beneath the scars. Your shoulders have thickened. Your hands are calloused enough to stop knives. Your face is leaner, your cheekbones sharper, your expression unreadable. The mirror is the water when it's still. You look down into it sometimes and almost don't recognise yourself. Not the villager, not the child of warm fields and open air. This version of you is weathered and wired for endurance. You don't speak much anymore. When you do, your voice sounds rough, like unused leather. You mutter in 2 languages now, your own and theirs. Neither feels entirely yours. You've stopped asking how long you'll live. The question itself has become irrelevant. You exist in units of survival. One more fire chopped. One more wound bound. One more winter passed without freezing to death in the straw. The gods don't answer. You've learned to stop expecting them to. The Norse gods love battle and glory. Your life is neither. No ravens circle your head. No Valkyrie waits to lift you to Valhalla. Your only afterlife is the memory you'll leave, which is none. If you die tomorrow, you'll be tossed into a ditch. The ground won't remember your name. No one will. And yet, somehow, that doesn't undo you. There's strength in this invisibility, in this stubborn refusal to give in. The fact that your breath still frosts in the air, your blood still runs warm, your legs still carry you forward. That, in its own way, is a kind of rebellion. You're not free, you're not remembered, you're not home, but you are alive. And in this land where life is cheap and death comes easy, that means something. Tomorrow the sun will rise behind a bank of steel clouds. The snow will crust hard underfoot. The oxen will moan. The master's son will shout. and you'll wake to it all, climb to your feet and begin again. Not because you hope for freedom, not because you believe in fate, but because this is the shape of your world now, brutal, cold, endless, and still somehow survivable.